And welcome to Ben's Junk, the show that never goes vinegar on you. And since we got our little film preservation joke in there, let's move on. So hopefully I can hit three birds with one stone with this video. One, last week was our annual Silent Movie Day episode. The one episode out of the year I do where I discuss something silent film related. And I figured we could kind of come down off of it with this episode and do a little more silent film, albeit not necessarily period. But there is no sound to this, and we are dealing with film. Two, I figured we could wrap up a bit of unfinished business from a thrifting episode that I put out over the summer that I shot in Minnesota while I was working on the AM stereo project. I found this in a little town called Fairmont. And three, I figured there are just so few videos on these things on YouTube that maybe I should do one just so there's something a little more complete. Most of the ones I've found are 2 minutes or less, and it's like some sleazy flea-based seller going, "Isn't this great? Isn't this great?" But they don't so much as turn it on because they know it doesn't work. Or it's somebody's lazy slideshow, or just pointing their camera at the screen as a film is playing, and you see 30 seconds of some random film and you don't learn anything. So, yeah, we'll discuss it a bit here. This will not be definitive by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a noob with this stuff myself, but maybe this will spur somebody who's got some real long-running experience with these things to make something. So with that, this is a Sears Do-All 8 motorized editor viewer for 8mm and Super 8mm movie film, of course. And I had been after specifically a motorized one of these things for quite a while because I figured it would be nice to have something that I could just, keep in the closet with my projectors. But say I found a film at a thrift store or at an antique store or I flea-bayed something, it would be nice to just reach in the closet, pull this sucker out, pull the arms out, throw on my reels, and just be able to check a film without having to worry about my projector and screen and, all the junk that you normally do. Well, this does do what it's supposed to. Nothing seems to be out of spec, as it were. But as I have found very quickly, this doesn't really quite meet my needs. So this video is actually going to be kind of the end of the road with me with regards to this particular unit. I think I know what I want truly out of one of these at this point. But we will discuss what I've got here. Anyway, I mentioned Sears Do-All 8, and of course Sears did not manufacture any of their own electronics. They were just rebadged from whatever other company. I would guess probably Bell & Howell for something like this. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I believe this dates to somewhere in the 1970 to 75 range. We're definitely in the Magnavox Odyssey wood grain sticker era here. With that, let's just start chatting a bit with regards to this. Now, I should note that I am shooting this out of order. Normally when I do a Ben's Junk, I do my little discussion first and then I do my demos. But I was worried that the light bulb, the lamp on this would not hold out. So I just shot everything, and that meant shooting all my rookie mistakes too. But I guess I didn't really need to worry because it still works. It's very dim, but I think most of these are a little on the dim side. Anyway, let's just get into this a bit here. This, at the time, would have certainly been meant first and foremost as an editor. And indeed, most of these things that you see in the wild are the old hand-cranked ones. And, you'd check your work by running it through the gate, and you'd cut your film in there. And you even got a little tray for your press tapes. Otherwise, let's just run this down. So I mentioned the bulb already. That proved to be my number one gripe with this thing. I could probably replace the bulb if I needed to, find another one, but I just don't think I really want to. And I don't know what the deal is. Maybe I'm just over analyzing it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong here. I would not put it past me. But if you look at the sticker on the bottom here, you might need to pause this video to read it. But it does mention how to change the bulb. But it makes it sound like there's something in here that just flips up. But that's not the case. And I've torn this down as far as I dare, and it's gotten me no closer to getting to the bulb. This is all the main part of this, the screen and everything. This whole chunk, the back notwithstanding, is all one molded piece. The screen, everything. So nothing goes in or out or up or down or anything of the sort. I can remove the gate and these parts here, but it doesn't get you down to the bulb, which is right under where my finger is on this thing. So that is a bit of a deal breaker. But on a even more practical level, this is just not stable enough. I mean, I do not expect perfection out of something like this, but the other big issue I have with this is drift. The speed on this is horribly inconsistent. But it does make sense, as one would expect with something like this. There's no belts or anything. We're dealing with just a couple of little motors built into these arm pieces here. They're about the size of a D-cell battery. And so you're not going to get a whole lot of power out of one of those. And it's also, what do they call that, a bearing motor, where there's no gears. It's all smooth. So that might be part of it. And it was making a lot of racket when I got this. So even though it seemed a little counterintuitive to try and grease it a bit, I did do it, and it helped immensely. But yeah, everything kind of depends on the condition of your film, the size of the reel, where you're at within the playback of a reel. I did do one test, in all my main stuff with this earlier, where I just let a film run. I did not try and adjust anything as I went along. And it starts out as close to normal as I could get, and then it speeds way up, and eventually it comes down a bit, but it's not anywhere near in the zone as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, also with regards to motors, we got a potentiometer here. Turn it clockwise to go forward, or counterclockwise to go backward, and you can, of course, crank up the speed in either direction. But funnily enough, you can't do a standard rapid rewind like you can with a projector, where you're not running it through the gate. You are always going to be running your film through the gate, no matter what you do. That's just how this thing is designed. Otherwise, let's talk about the gate for a bit here. It's pushed in for Super 8 or pulled out for Standard 8. But to get it back into Super 8, it's a little bit funky. It doesn't always work. I actually got pretty easy that time. Sometimes it'll just stop on me. But the issue seems to be that there is no track in here. Everything is just held on with a couple of screws and then one screw for the top part. And it's also mostly plastic. The only metal piece is the turning piece with the sprockets in there to stick in the sprocket holes of the film and advance the film. So I guess, for lack of a better term, it's free floating, which does not help. And it definitely does not help in terms of alignment of the film within the screen. So there is a frame adjust on here. It's the third button /switch. And that will just go vertical. If you need to adjust horizontal, you have to kind of dink around with the gate. downside of that is if you pull it even more than just slightly, you do run the risk of knocking the film off the track, so to speak, and damaging the film. And also on the note of damaging the film, I was able to use this without damaging anything, but I could see where somebody would very easily damage something they didn't intend to. So say you were using this as an editor, and I could see some teenager getting this back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, and they're just getting into filmmaking and they're learning editing on this, and they're learning how to try and cut their story together. I could totally see where their hand would slip and say it would hit the mark switch, the left. Well, normally when you think marking film within the realm of editing, it's just with a grease pencil, just drawing a little line on it, and it can be wiped off if you messed up or something. But if you're even a little off with something like this, when you press that mark button, a little claw comes down and dents the film. So you better be right on where you want to edit. I don't entirely get that. And I did shoot some footage of this in action because you only can see it with the gate removed. Otherwise, the second switch, for lack of a better term, it's a rocker switch. It's to adjust the focus. Now, I thought maybe something had come loose at some point, and while I had this torn apart as far as I dared again, nope, it's a very, very loose focus switch. So if you listen, it's very floppy. It does not lock on to focus the way it should, so it's extremely easy to knock it out of whack. Otherwise, they don't tell you this anywhere on here, and unfortunately I don't have the manual, but the lamp switch is also the power switch. There is no power switch otherwise, and you cannot do anything else unless that is engaged. Otherwise, let's turn this around for a moment here. We got our spots to hook up reels. And I have a few things to say about this, actually. So this is, as I mentioned, dual 8, and it will take a Super 8 reel with the bigger hole in the middle, or this is a Super 8 reel as well, but with an adapter. So standard 8 with the smaller one. But I would say use as much standard 8 gear as you can on this. The little slots for Super 8 are only an 1/8 inch long on this. So if I can get this on here and get it to actually land, there we go, and I lock off the reel, it's really floppy. It is not good. But you have more like a quarter, third of an inch for standard 8, and it's a little tighter, a little more of a grip, and you can't mess with it quite as badly as you would otherwise. Now, on that note, with regards to reels, for one, this plays far nicer with standard 8 than it does Super 8. I've learned what little stability there is to this thing is mostly with regards to standard 8 film. But also, I'm very used to dealing with a projector. So you're thinking front to back with a projector. In this case, you have to think of it like a videotape. So you have your supply and your take-up. But yeah, that's not necessarily how you would normally think of it. And when you're threading up the film, you wind up putting things backwards. And I found that you really wind up all too often having to just manually yank out a little extra film and set your reel down and thread it by hand and advance it a little bit just on the table and then stick it onto its hub, if you will. And that's kind of it for this. So I mentioned that I shot all my demos ahead of time. I did all my test footage. So I guess I will leave you with some choice moments from those tests. I did a good assortment of standard 8 and Super 8. I even sacrificed some of my good reels for this, but like I said, nothing got damaged. I was able to run a new old stock copy of the Black Hawk Films Standard 8 sampler reel on this with no issue. I ran some of the film that I shot on Super 8 last year through here, no issue. So you'll see some black and white, you'll see some color, you'll see some stuff that was well made, some that wasn't so well made, and hopefully you get a good cross section of at least what this is capable of and just the gist of one of these things. But otherwise, that is going to be it for me on the vocal front. I think anything else I would have to say could be done in text form. So yeah, I'm going to call it a day on the vocal front, and I'll talk to you again soon.